Welcome to the Kanban Coaching Exchange this evening. It's great to have you with us. And this evening, we are joined by the one and only Jose Casal. Now, I was trying to actually remember, and maybe you remember this, Jose, but I can't actually remember where I met you, but I know it was many, many, many years ago, probably at something like Lean Agile London.
I remember.
Do you? Tell
Was-
us.
It was in Meyerhofen, one of the Kanban leadership retreats, I think.
Ah,
That's what
Meyerhofen.
actually, at least that's the earliest memory I think I have of you when we had like Meyerhofen was like deep conversations and a lot of enjoyment there. So Kanban leadership retreats, yeah.
Trapped in a little village in Austria with a magic fridge full of beer and full of Kanban people. What more could you ask for?
Yes.
So I've known Jose a
Oh,
very, very long time.
yes.
Um, he's very known in the industry for Kanban. His contribution to the community, ran Agile Lean London for many years on a little hiatus at the moment. Currently
Mm,
living in Finland, but kicking off in Agile. So he's still got that spark for bringing that community people together.
yeah.
He's a Flight Levels Academy trainer. He's also a Kanban trainer. He's been in Pro Kanban. He's been in the Kanban University. He's been in all of the different Kanban factions. We'll let him off on that one. But he's got a whole wealth of experience to bring to you this evening. So welcome, Kanban. Uh, welcome, Kanban.
Come on, yeah, there you are.
welcome,
Well done.
welcome, Jose, back to the Kanban Coaching Exchange. That's what I meant to say. It's been a long day.
That was great. Hey,
I'll
no,
cut that
thank you.
out.
Yeah. Thank you for having me. It's been a few years as well since I was last at the Kanban Coaching Exchange, so it's always a privilege and an honor to be back here. Um, and having quite a few faces that I recognize and faces that I don't recognize, so it was a good opportunity to connect with people. As Helen is saying, um, yes, I've been in the Kanban community, Fly Levels community, Flow for quite a long time now. When I used to be the young one, I'm not anymore. But over the years, like training and coaching, consulting in the agile space, business agility, and so on. What I've obviously, like everybody, will have an evolution, and we get to see things differently. We evolve. We go deeper into our understanding. So what I like to share today is a some of the nuances or some of the things that I think most of us get wrong at some point. Or in particular, I got them wrong at one point, and now probably I think a little bit different to what I used to think. So this is not going to be a Kanban is wrong about this, because I don't think Kanban is wrong. But I think many times it's how we understand Kanban or how we go when we look at the nuances, some of the challenges that we have in what works and what doesn't work, why it doesn't work, or why it works. So yes, I don't know if my keyboard is gonna work now, but as Helen saying, um, if I can get this to work, why is my screen? I'm failing at the point of a star.
See, this is what I was saying about age, Jose. 10 years ago, you'd have been like nailed it.
We were just doing it before. So yeah, I'm going to be sharing some of the many things that I got wrong myself. And bear in mind that as Helen's saying, I've been doing training for well over a decade. I've trained several thousand people, coached lots of people. So some of these is things that I used to say, and I used to say, I used to train and coach, and over time you realize some things that maybe we could do slightly different. So I like to start. I'm going to be making this as interactive as I can. It's Menti. So you go to menti.com and you use the code. There will be the QR code in a minute. I would like to do this interactive. I will ask you a few questions and see what we as a group we come up with. So the first question that I would like to ask, you have a QR code there, is that when we're looking at Kanban, what does good Kanban practice look like to you? Try to keep it, it's going to be a word cloud, so try to keep it one or two words per submission. You can submit multiple times. So we have like flow there. Okay, so I'm gonna give you a few seconds to go for it. Love to see some of the usual suspects coming back here in screen. Great. Excellent. Okay, so we got really good things, but we got stuff like whip and flow and pull and whip limits I also see there, and speed and visualization, all those things, clear policies. And you connect it to, for example, the Kanban principles and practices from Kanban University, all these words appear there. Okay, predictable delivery, all those things. So that's great. Okay, so what I would like to talk about this is three sections. One is what I would call the language trap. The other one is what I call the workflow illusion. And the other one is going to call it the missing level or the missing link. If you want, you could reorder them in which one, how did they resonate with you, one, two, or three? That gives me a little bit of feedback, yeah? But we're going to be talking about how we use our Kanban language, things that I've seen or I struggle with around workflow, and then things about how things that I believe sometimes is missing. All right. So if you want to give me just a quick ordering, if you want, about how do they resonate with you, this is just purely information from me as well. I'm gonna move quickly. Cool. So interesting at the moment is in reverse order. Great. So we leave the best for the last, the most interesting ones for the last. Okay. So let's start with the language trap. For the language trap, I like to talk about three things, and they came up in the some of it came up on the workload that you did. I like to talk about work in progress or process. I want to talk about limiting WIP, and I want to talk about this famous mantra that we have in the Kanban community about stop starting, start finishing. So to start with work in progress and process, obviously this could be like your fans of Life of Brian. This is potentially is the what is it, the Judean people's front or the people's front of Judea? Yeah. Which one is which camp do you belong to for you? When you think about WIP, what does it mean? Work in progress, work in process. Both, never really thought about it. So work in progress is winning. To me, this matters because the official term that we used has always been, and you see today in the literature, we use the word work in progress. Now, there is significant parts of the community that denied the concept of progress, and they said, no, it's in process. I get that because in some ways, I think what many times we have when we talk about work in progress, we are telling ourselves a delusion or a lie. The work is in progress. That's what we're telling ourselves when it might not be in progress. Yeah. So we say, oh no, what it is in process, which is a better term. I'm actually going to talk about it because I think that both terms are not good enough. Work in process might be better, but it's still not good enough. Now, when you think about your current board, try to picture your current boards or your current systems. What percentage of items do you think are genuinely moving forward in your systems, or they're silently stuck? What sort of percentage? So you can select 1 to 5. If you select 1, it's all stuck. If you say 5, everything is moving forward. Anything in between? So we are somewhere in the middle. We got three point something, erring towards the right. I can see that the graph is a little bit more to the right. So a lot of threes and four, mostly threes and four. Someone says it's all stuck. That's worrying as well, right? But even with your own feedback, what we're seeing is like many times our boards, the work is not really in progress. Now, this becomes really interesting when we start using things like aging charts. I love the aging chart. If there is one, I'll say, transformative thing that we can use, I don't know how many of you use aging charts, but if there is one game changer in behavior, is the aging chart. This is a real chart from a company that I was working with some time ago. This is meaningful, chunky pieces of work. Call them, could be initiatives, could be features, something big. All right. And when you look at that chart, if you think about this is work in progress, you have a whole column on the left, which was actually called on hold. And there were 187 items on hold. In the process and on hold. As no progress. Then you have items there in the red, which were, I hypothesized they were orphaned for more than 1,000 days. 3-4 years in the system, in the process. Yeah. And you could also see that the work doesn't seem to be, as it's moving forward, it doesn't seem to age beyond a certain age. So what I mean, hypothesis that we have, and it was true, is that the work will be abandoned and this copy because it was old. So it will go into this on hold column to die a slow death. Now, for the company, for a company that has, if you have a board like this, it might say like, well, we're still managing the work. But there is a couple of things here. One is that every dot there is a broken promise. It's an expectation that has been created with someone, somewhere. And if it's not progressing, it's a broken promise. It's a disappointment. It's a loss of trust, a lack of delivery, lack of credentials and credibility. Yeah. Mike, I'm going to take a question, but it has to be very quick. You're muted. We move on? Okay. Yeah. So, but all this is work in progress. This is work that has started and not finished. That's the definition of work in progress. Is work that has started and not finished. Yeah. So for me, the problem one of the problems we have with this terminology is that we are telling ourselves a lie. We're telling ourselves the sensation that we're in progress or we're in process. None of that. That's not true. I love something that Agustin Villena in the Chile community does. He calls the work in Spanish trabajo a medio hacer. The best translation I can do is half-done work. It's potential waste. It has started and not finished. It potentially is a tragedy. We have put some time, we have created expectation, we didn't get to do it. And I think our laser focus should be about finishing work as fast as possible. So we need to use language that kind of like incentivizes that thinking. Yeah, not the language that creates the illusion of progress and then we get relaxed. By calling it something like unfinished work, half-done work, looking at charts like the aging chart, it makes us visibly uncomfortable. So it gets people to actually take action and not ignore the work because it's in progress or forgotten. So that's the first one. I have learned to, I don't know, almost attack one of the holy totems of Kanban. I don't like the term whip anymore. I'd rather use half-done work or something else. Yeah? Which takes us to then the word limit in limiting whip. A couple of years ago, I wrote an article that was called Limiting Work in Progress Sucks. I've never had anything remotely viral. That one had like 1,000 responses. Oh my God, that was stressful. Um, and but why? Um, I would like you to talk about when you introduce WIP management to a team or organization. What's the most common reaction that you have? Give me your choices. The it depends is for the consultants in the room, of course, and the coaches. So I'm saying that mostly some curiosity but hesitation, significant resistance, but there is nothing rarely to see someone that instantly people buy in. And that resonates with my own experience. And in the Kanban community, we keep talking about like people keep resisting WIP limits. It's so difficult to introduce them. Something that is so logical in some ways. Why is it resisted so many times? Why is it resisted so hard? And I think the problem that we have is the language itself. Yeah. The answer for me typically is like, if there is an answer, is that I can see significant resistance. Um, Now, the problem for me is that the word limit is anti-cultural, especially from a Western society perspective. When we believe that, in growth and things like that, we say that you're limiting me. Yeah. So the word limit becomes anti-cultural, which immediately creates resistance. So there are three core beliefs that the term limiting WIP or WIP limits clash against. The first one is that we still believe, and we still put in practice this as a business mantra, that the more we do or the more we start, the more we achieve. We deeply believe that as a practice. The other core belief is that we believe that being busy is a good thing. How many of us have said at some point, I have done this, how I am really, really busy, I like, proud, badge of honor. We've said this. Even if it's unhealthy and draining and unsustainable, we still say that many times in business. I'm so busy. And the last one is that we still believe that we can multitask when we know that we can't. We can do things, we can multitask when we're doing things which are significantly different. We can walk and talk, but we cannot do mathematical calculations while reading a book or talking. If we are doing cognitive knowledge things, we cannot multitask. We're not good at it. Some people are, but typically we don't. So these things are clashing with these beliefs clashing with the idea that we need to limit ourselves. And it's in the word, it's in the semantic meaning. What I'm hearing is that you want to limit me. It's anti-cultural, especially in the Western world. Yeah. So there are better alternatives. I learn to use better alternatives. I don't use the word with limits almost ever anymore. I talk about first of all, when we talk about work in progress, and I talk about collectively, I talk about your workload. I don't talk about the WIP itself. And then do two things, which one is like focus on the aging work. Why I focus on the aging work? Because then that is culturally resonant. In the Western world, again, we don't like aging, more or less. Yeah. So it's at least more culturally resonant. When you see work that is aging, people respond to that. It resonates rather than creates resistance. Aging charts are fantastic for this. Yeah. And the other one is that I talk more about balance or sustainable workload rather than WIP limits. So we talk about many times about what is our balanced workload? How do we find a sense of equilibrium when we match the workload with our capacity to do work as much as we can? Yeah. Which is interesting when you do this shift, when you pay attention to aging and when you start talking about balance or sustainable workloads. is something really interesting happens. Because assuming that people start from they have too much work, which is typically what happens, the way that then you manage this, and it's surprising, the way you manage this is by limiting your amount of work, by reducing your workload. So we actually get to the outcome that we wanted. But rather than going and clashing against the cultural beliefs of that limiting WIP generates, we take different approach, look at aging, look at balance, and they become a Trojan horse because the response to achieve those is by managing the workload. So it's a very, very, very subtle, powerful shift that I've learned on my own. And I still have elements of resistance, still struggle, but it's much, much better. So those are two. Then we go to the next one, which is connected, about the stop starting and start finishing. How often have you used this term, stop starting and start finishing, in the last year? Do you use it regularly, occasionally, rarely, never use it, never seen it before? I'm realizing that some of the hue of green is not very clear, which one is which. So which one is that? That's never, regularly, occasionally. So it is sort of like a popular term that we use. Yeah. In my company, we print these stickers. We have like what we call our agility stickers. This is the first ever design that we did. We used to give them in conferences, in meetups, in training, everywhere. Yeah. This one in particular, I have printed thousands of these. And they will fly in a conference. In a conference, we could go, people will take 100 of them to take to their own businesses. Super popular. I struggle with this term today because I think using stop and start is not what really resonates. It's a language trap. I hear many times when you use this, that companies start hearing stop means not taking any, no, sorry, stop starting and start finishing. When you say stop starting, what they hear is they should not start anything. And that generates resistance and friction. But that's not what we mean. We don't really mean stop everything. But the sentence appears to say something like that, stop starting and start finishing. So what we're trying to say these days is like, it's not stop, but it's actually don't start things too soon or prematurely, or don't start things if you don't have a capacity to finish them. So I played with a different version of this, which is what we need to do is be slow to start and then be fast to finish. So don't start simply because you can. Start because you think you can finish. And the sentence can continue, you can finish as quickly as possible. And that reframe can be really important because how do you think you can finish is that with the knowledge that I have today, what is going to take to finish a piece of work? Especially if you're doing things beyond the team where you're going to have multiple teams working or you have dependencies, it kind of like encourages a conversation to say, all right, we got a feature. How are we going to deliver this? Or we need a skills A, B, and C. All right, those are not available in all the teams. So now how do we coordinate these teams? Oh, team B is going to be super busy. Okay, well, then maybe we shouldn't start because we cannot finish it, or we cannot finish it in a reasonable amount of time. The opposite is what we do is that this thing about being busy. Oh, a team has a capacity or appears to have capacity. They can start something. Well, let's just start work. Give them work without really thinking about what are the consequences on the rest of the organization, on the rest of the system. So we need to be slow to start and think about it and check that we have a capacity and be fast to finish. I think for me, the slow fast is a better wording than stop and start. Same spirit, but I think it's a better wording. And I have a struggle with it less. Cool. So as a quick thing, I don't know if I convinced you at all, but would you stop starting? Would you use that? Yes, still works for you. Yes, but that a bit of context. No. And that's comparing to what you said originally about whether you found resistance or not. Right? And someone has a different, even you won't use a version, if you might have a better version, that's okay. That's great. So see, these are the things that I have been struggling, and I think sometimes I go wrong. Cool. So language matters. Obviously it matters. And that also in some ways carries towards the work, what I call the workflow illusion. It's like when we talk about workflow and so on, there are some things that I see which are challenging, and I've also changed over the years. First thing, we're going to talk about workflow, role flow, or weight flow. Then something about like the assumption of linearity. Going to talk about column width limits. There we go, again, width limits. And something about turbulent flows. So think about the last Kanban board you designed or reviewed, or if you haven't, the last one that you work with. What did the columns primarily represent in that board? Were the stages of the work, were roles or teams or skills who handle the work? Is it a mix? Right. Good. That's the workflow by its own name is how the work flows through through the system that you have. So the work, each one of those columns should be representing some sort of like the stage that the work moves through. But it should be always describing what the work goes through, the work flows. What I have typically see is that many Kanban boards, at least the ones that I usually encounter, and when I say Kanban boards, could be Scrum or whatever framework boards, visualization boards. Many times what they're doing is that they're visualizing what I said, the handovers between the different roles in the system. And you start hearing something like, this is the column for the developers. That's the column for the testers. If you see things like, oh, we have a defect. All right, put the ticket back or send the ticket back to the development column. If you have things like that, that board, those columns are probably being used as a role flow. They're associated with particular skills in the team or sub teams. Many times you see like something like analysis or triage or development or test. Yeah, and the developers are only really interested in working in the development column. Tell them to go and do something that is in test. They're like, that's not my column. That's not my column. Sorry, boss. Oh, sorry, governor. Yeah. If you see things like that, that group of people, that system is probably taking those columns as role flow, not workflow. The columns might not be representing how the work flows through the system. When I was working in Scottish government, for example, we had we intentionally used column names that did not match any of the roles in the team. So in that case, we call them, I think we call research, implementation, validation, approval, and life. So we had like rival as a acronym.
Same here.
Same, similar, cool.
Works.
And because the research was analysis, discovery, UX, whatever it was. Yeah, spikes, whatever. Yeah. So if we needed something technical and the developers need to be involved, they would just do work in the research phase of that ticket. If there was a defect while we were validating the work, the developers could go and work in that ticket while it was in the validation phase. Yeah, we try to do something that we remove that identity where people say my column, my precious. All right, I see this many times, and it actually took me a while to realize that's what's happening and try how to break it. Um, the Scottish Government one, for example, is about 10 years ago, but I have been doing Kanban for a few years when I started to realize and see this. Which also take me to the next one, because when we move beyond the team and we start looking at the organization, um, especially organizational flows, where there is going to be what we call low flow efficiency, lots of waiting, lots of delays. It's even more important to visualize the waiting steps than the working steps. In many Kanban boards, I see only the active stages, and we don't really see the waiting stages in between. And if you're in a low flow efficiency, by definition, the waiting component is much bigger to your time to market and things like that than the active part. It's a bit technical, this. But when I go beyond the team, in particular, I'm working in product, portfolio, service, strategy boards, whatever it is, they pay a lot of attention on what I call the wait flow, because that's where most of the time is consumed. The work is waiting for someone to have time to do something or to prioritize it. And I don't think we do enough. Yeah. Again, that's something that took me years to. We always say about the waiting columns, we usually talk about them as they are pull signals, so they can be pulled to the next active stage often. But when we're looking in the business context, and in particular with low flow efficiency environments, those waiting columns are they are the core of your system. If you have a flow efficiency of 10%, it means that 10% of the time the work is in an active column, 90% is in a waiting column. That's why it's more important. And 10%, it's very common, let's say, if you can calculate it. So that's about workflow, role flows, and wave flows. I think many times when we talk about workflow, in practice, we don't have workflows, we have role flows, and we are missing the wave flow. All right. So then we have this linearity assumption. When we are looking at Kanban boards, we always think about the tickets moving left to right. Again, very Western view of flow. Yeah, tickets move in one direction. Do you allow backward flows in your system? This is the one that I have actually have the biggest change in the last year or so. Because I actually was in that no, I don't allow it, and it's heresy camp, and I fought it, backward flow, and I had all these reasons why, and people still do it if they could. So then we try to do things so that the tools stop allowing people to do backward flow, and then at one point I realized that, you know what, I'm wrong. I'm wrong about this. Let's go through this. Why? And this is the most recent thing. I could say that this is probably I changed my mind and my approach within the last 2 years. So when we think about flow, we think about pictures like this. What is this? Anybody recognizes this?
River Thames.
River Thames in London. Yeah. We many times visualize flow systems, Kanban boards, as if it was a kind of like a stable river, flowing nicely, with channeled, it's well contained enjoyable. You might even be able to swim in some rivers. Many of them know. And you can think about the Thames, you can think of the Danube, the Seine, whatever. Yeah? But we think about flow as if it was like this. Right? You recognize this? Just a couple of miles down the river, down the flow. The Thames. This is the Thames Gateway, isn't it? No, Thames Barrier. I keep saying the Thames Gateway. Do you see what's happening in that moment? The barrier is raised. So what's happening is that if the barrier was not acting there, the river will be actually be flowing backwards, as in the sea will be coming into London and it will flood London. This was predicted to happen once every I don't know how many years. Rarely. It's happening more and more frequently. It's now predicted that the Thames Barrier is not gonna be fit for purpose very soon, in the next few years, and London could get flooded. Because at that point, when you see the bottom of the image, that's the North Sea trying to go into London, and the barrier is stopping it. The North Sea is higher at that point. Yeah? Just down the line from London. That's not something that we usually picture in our Kanban boards. Yeah? And if you go further down the river, this is the Thames estuary. So you have Kent there. I used to live there in Canterbury. Yeah. Look at those flows. It doesn't look as steady, doesn't it? It looks a little bit turbulent. Yeah. So what kind of flow do we have in our systems? Is it the steady one, or is it the more pressed to do things backwards, to change your mind in some ways, or is this kind of like all over the place flow? I think many times is the most honest workflow design includes backward flow. The problem many times is that tools don't know how to handle but they allow you to do backward flow, but they don't know what to do with the data that is collected. Especially the metrics tools are horrible at doing forecasting and using that data about the ticket has moved backwards. So people like me then went and said, no, you cannot move it backwards because you're going to screw my data. Well, sorry, the data can, yeah. So yeah, that's the thing about many times is that it's actually, sometimes the tickets need to move forward because we discover things, because we learn things, because we made a genuine mistake, because we have to change our mind. And it's actually okay to go backwards. Yeah, we live in complex environments. It's not linear, what we do. So let's talk about then WIP limits, because when we're thinking about that, we have workflows, columns that may or may not represent workflow, may be representing other things. We may have missing columns like the weight columns. We have this non-linearity where work can go forward and backwards. Then you see things like this. I don't know if the slides look like this, I hope not. When I stopped doing Kanban University training about 6 years ago, we still have these kind of pictures. Yeah. So when I was looking for one, this resonated with me because I used to use this. I used to train people on the idea of WIP columns. How well do WIP limits serve the knowledge work teams in practice? That's a question. Column WIP, if you use them, how well do they serve? You're in 50-50-ish. The thing is that this kind of column WIP is probably used really, really commonly in the training classes. And probably we also do it a lot of when we're doing coaching and consulting. And, if we're saying that about, it's not really serve the community, why are they so popular? Now, what I think is many times that column-based whip limits will only work if the stages are sort of like real, very, very solid, sequential, and stable. And those are characteristics of what I would say semi-deterministic industrial environments. If you use terminology like Cynefin, complicated environments, order environments. I like to say that I have never seen in my career a single use of column whip that was reliable enough. And using the word never is not, in my experience, I don't have any memory of a single board that had a good use of column whip. I don't even know, and I've been doing Kanban for like 17, 18 years, since I first used the word Kanban. I've never known how to calculate a good whip limit for column-based whips. I can't. The only way to do it, the only way I know how to do it, is to use resource thinking. And say, oh, I got two people, in two developers, role-based, role columns. Yeah. Well, if they have 2 tickets per person, that's a whip of 4. That's horrible use of flow thinking. Mike, quick one, please.
So super quickly, I think this is the bad adoption of Kanban with slow K. It works in manufacturing, but doesn't work in hyper unpredictable systems.
Exactly. And that's the thing, knowledge work contains too much intrinsic variability for this to work. It just doesn't work, especially if you think about the two aspects we were saying just now about the fact that there is backward follow, there is variability, the columns don't really represent the work most of the time, and so on. So I use typically system level whip. When I use the word system level whip, what I'm trying to do is associate it with the capacity of the team. So I can start connecting to things like throughput calculations. Yeah, what kind of capacity we tend to have based on our delivery. Yeah, but I tend to use system level flow management approaches, right? And it's a more practical alternative for me when we have environments which are VUCA and VANI. And VUCA and VANI are the characteristics of our system. I hope you're familiar with them. I will say quickly, VUCA is volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. And VANI is brittle, anxious, non-linear, and incomprehensible. Yeah? And all those kind of like describe the kind of environments that we are working in, the kind of systems that we work in. So things like column whip, I just don't even try. All right. Now, some of you will say, oh, but maybe we can put a whip limit only at the bottleneck. Anybody thinking about that? Gonna go to the next one in a minute.
Even worse.
Okay. So one more thing. I'm gonna be like a Steve Jobs. Yeah. If the whip limit, I'm using the word whip limit here, represents your system's capacity, something that I don't think we understand well enough is that whip, that is telling us what the level of workload that we should aim to work at. We shouldn't be working below the whip. We shouldn't be working above the whip. We should be working at exactly that level. Because what we're saying is that whip, system whip, is our capacity. So we should be aiming to work at capacity or within our capacity. Because we are in VUCA environments, there is variability. Maybe you say, hey, our system whip should be between 8 and 10. So you can put a bracket. But this notion that whip limit is only an upper limit, it's actually something that I come to think that is incorrect. It's not like, oh, you can be below whip. You should be aiming to work at whip, if that represents our capacity. That's something that, again, I changed my mind over the years. And I don't think we communicate that. We communicate whip limits as trying to do less. So then you have all these ideas about, oh, the best thing is single pass flow, whip of 1. That's, again, that's not good. All right? And that's a bit of a fundamental reframe for me about what whip limits. If whip limits represent the capacity, then we should be trying to work at a balanced state between our capacity and our workload. So, turbulent flow. If we're talking about bottlenecks there, so many times our systems with all this VUCA, all this variability, all this non-linearity, all those things, and BANI and so on, what is the bottleneck? Because we love to talk about bottleneck. By the way, this I expect if anybody's in the TOC, Theory of Constraints community, will go and start swearing at me what I'm going to say. But I think many times we talk about too much about bottlenecks, and we talk about defend against the bottleneck and protect the bottleneck and all these things. I think our bottlenecks are often moving all the time. They are not static. So this we think, oh, the bottleneck can move over a period of time. I've seen environments that the bottleneck can move several times. The bottleneck can move several times the constraint in a single sprint, in a single 2 weeks or 3 weeks. Sometimes it's the product owner is not available or is busy, so it's not. So that is what's holding us. Sometimes it's like, oh, the testers are overloaded. Sometimes it's like, oh, we have an external dependency blocking everything, or a server has gone down. Because we have variability, we have to expect that the bottleneck is moving in response to that variability. So many times in the Kanban world, we think of bottlenecks as, oh, bottleneck is in testing. And you're like, it's not in testing right now. Testers are okay. Yeah. The problem that we have right now is that we are being held by a dependency where someone is not, another team is busy, or the product owner is busy, or whatever it is. So many times for me, the bottleneck keeps moving. And all this idea about thinking about bottlenecks as if they were static, that happens in factories, does not happen in knowledge work. All right? So I've learned to not say these things. And then I'm going to move to the missing level. I'm mindful about the time. So, and the fact that I think many times when we talk about Kanban, many Kanban systems probably are silos, or they are at the risk of becoming silos. I've done this time and time again, and I have to catch myself. And sometimes we don't have like systemic views of organizational flows. So let me go on and wrap this one. When you think about, just interesting about what you are, at what level does your Kanban system primarily operate? When you're talking about your Kanban systems, if you're using Kanban, at what level? You can distribute 100 points across these three. Are you primarily, or part of it is delivery sort of team level? Is it mostly dealing with, or part of it is doing with multi-team coordination? Or do you have a full system view across the organization? Also, we have a mix, but the majority we're talking about delivery and team level. I think that matches my what I usually see. Most of the implementations or most of the Kanban that I see when I work is very much about an agile is meant. We seem that we cannot stop talking about teams and team agility, and we really should be talking about business agility. So the majority of this is team level, and I would say that a lot of the Kanban that we see today and we teach is team level Kanban. Okay, I know that some of the Kanban leads will come and exercise me for saying this, but that's what I see. And I used to pay all the attention to team level, great team level Kanban if I could. Now I realized that this is not enough. It just wasn't enough, and it doesn't make an impact to the organization. Right? So when I was teaching Kanban, this is how I'm familiar with the static. This is how this is a picture that Mario Strione, again, a Argentinian guy that lives in Chile. That's how I used to draw. No, this is much better version of how I used to draw. I used to draw this. He prettified it. Yeah. Static, the systems thinking approach to implementing Kanban. And I think static, it's lovely. I really, really love it because it's making us think about, okay, how does the work arrive? How does the work live? What kind of dependencies? And how do we work with it, right? But inside that gray box, where the number 4 is, we're doing this most of the time. We say systems thinking. I don't think it's systems thinking per se, because what we have in there in the center is probably a single board and a single team, normally. Yeah. So if so system thinking is about the interactions across many teams. The other thing about this is that this is very much from the team perspective. So it's a hierarchical view of systems thinking. What does the team has to do? Yeah. And I've done this a lot and still use a static. I still love asking the questions, but I try to do this after a while, because the first question that I have is more about how does the work actually flow through through the organization. I have something that I call flow mapping. It's kind of like how I work with things like flight levels. It's very much in the flight levels camp, but flight levels itself also starts asking questions about what is what we call the system architecture. And I think the challenge with both static the way it is and systems architectures is that we are having structural conversations, hierarchical conversations, organigram conversations about how how the teams work. And I think we need to put the work at the center of this conversation. So what I try to do with this is to say, all right, what organizationally, how does the work get created first? It could be through strategic themes, new legislation, BAU, product request, whatever it is. And then what does that become? That work, it becomes an initiative. Or how does the initiative become a feature and an epic and then a story and then gets released? What happens with defects or bugs? What happens with other things? What kind of interactions do we need? Who needs to be involved? Who needs to then coalesce around this work to make it happen so they can flow fast through the organization? So when you put the flow of work at the core, once you establish a flow map like this, then you can start thinking about what kind of teams or what kind of people structures do we need around this. When we're looking at static, we start with the team that exists, and probably this is a remnant of things like start where you are now. Sometimes you start in the wrong place, so you cannot polish it. You need to rethink it, and a lot of the agile and Kanban that I've done and I've seen is actually serving the needs of resource thinking when it should be serving the needs of flow thinking. Yeah. So that's something again that I've been looking at business agility and business flows and flight levels for more than a decade now. So to recap, this is the list of things that I got wrong myself at some point. Some of those may resonate with you, that you say, okay, maybe me too. But language trap, the use of work in progress or process, limiting WIP, stop, start, finishing, whether we have good workflows, whether the systems are linear, how do we use things like WIP with volatile environments, turbulent flow, all these things. All right. So just to finish, if you were going to change one thing or stop doing something, what is the one thing from today that resonates with you but might be the hardest thing to stop doing? It's an open thing, so you can chat, write it a little bit. It will be interesting to see what piece of reflection you have. Cool. Focusing on the thing. Yeah. Klaus says that agility is not a team sport. Agility is a business sport. I think that's very good. Good. Yeah, I mean, this thing about not allowing items moving backwards was a very difficult thing for me to change my mind. I was really resisting, but I was resisting for the wrong reasons, in my opinion. Right, so that's a good things, a few interesting things. thanks a lot. I hope you found it interesting. I can take a few questions, I guess, if we have some time. Um, I'll say thank you, gracias and kiitos, because I live in Finland now. And if you're interested, some of these things that I've written today, I have blogged about them, some of them. So probably the best way, that QR code is my Substack. And also LinkedIn, but finding historical posts in LinkedIn is impossible. So thanks a lot. I hope it's useful. I'm happy to take some questions if you want to stay. But yeah, I hope you find it
Very useful.
inspiring, challenging, food for thought. And remember, I'm not criticizing Kanban. These are things that I think Kanban is great. These are things that I have changed my mind over the years, and I have made these mistakes myself.
Okay, so let's first of all, before we do questions, let's give Jose a round of applause to thank him for his time and his thinking and his musings. Okay, let's open the floor for questions. You can either pop your hand up like Tomo, or you can pop it into the chat channel and I will ask those for you. Tomo, do you want to kick us off with a question or
Great.
point, whatever?
This is wonderful stuff. Totally brilliant. I'm thinking a lot,
Thank you, Tom.
but a lot of it kind of pokes holes in what I think I know. Do you
Mhm.
have something to fill the holes in? Some kind of structures that work better? Some kind of you express some words, but I can't imagine how to do my Kanban boards anymore.
So, I mean, some of the things is like if we're talking about the language ones, what I try to use is a different language. Like I don't use the word WIP limits. I try to talk about what is our capacity, what is our workload. Yeah. So things like that. If we're talking about the second part about the workflow illusion, I would change things like I start using WIP, system WIP. I will start working about what does the board, the workflow really, the columns really represent. Does it represent work? So there is practical thing. I'm happy to follow up. Some of these things I may have written about them, some other not. But if happy to talk about it. I don't know if I can be concrete about any particular thing. But this is the important
Do
thing.
do you do you use a regular Kanban board still? Just different?
Yes, yes, all the time. I mean, yeah, I don't know life without Kanban. Kanban is life, put it that way.
I think on that whip limit one, I think that's an interesting point. I mean, I don't mind what word you use, but like over the years, I have noticed that there's a misunderstanding that when you say limiting whip, that the team are not working to their full potential. That's
People
kind of
feel
how
bad
it
enough. Yes,
it kind of like translates to the other people that that's what they hear. And I
yes,
spend lots of time saying, well, no, that's not actually what it means. It means that we have to understand how much work is realistic that we can do based upon unplanned work coming into the system, uh, time for development and improving the way that we do things. So like what's the optimal number of things that we can work on and keep things flowing through the system?
yeah,
And so,
totally.
yeah, that totally resonates with me. And I was trying to think of what could be a bit better word that could be used.
So for me, it was a change of word. I started to stop talking, not talk about WIP, and the idea that anything that has started and not finished is potential waste, is unrealized value. So I calling it half the unfinished work, half done work, things like that, because they carry the feeling. It cannot like become it cannot like it resonates in a way that is congruent with the intent that we have. And the word limit, I totally what you said is absolutely spot on. It's because it's clashing with those core beliefs. It's
Mm,
anti-culture. So I have changed to not use the word whip or the word limit, but to capacity. Capacity resonates totally with, and workload resonates much, very, very culture. And then age is incredibly resonant
mm,
because again, our society does not like age or aging. So
mm.
it resonates. So yeah, it's things like that. But for me, it's using words. And actually, I don't use the same words in every company because some companies what resonates might be slightly different. But I try to use the right intent in a way that resonates with the context as well.
And I think that's the important, isn't it? That like often my classes, like the words don't matter. You can call it whatever you want. It's the
Yeah.
intent that sits behind it. It's the behavior, how you
Yes.
use that thing and the benefit that it gives you and the organization and the value that you deliver. Yeah.
Oh, another one. This about like cycle time, lead time, cucumber time. I don't care.
Don't
I
care.
tend, I tend to use elapsed time because that's actually what we're measuring, elapsed time.
Exactly. Elapsed
Yeah.
time.
But if people want to call it cucumber time, let's call it cucumber time. I don't care.
So the
It's
intent, just measure
it's
something.
yeah, yes. So with Mike, I think is the next one.
Yeah, go on, Mike.
Super quickly, changing and finding the right language and words is important, especially in environments like mine where the minority of people have British as their first language. So you need to come up with clarifying what you mean by every word and something you can reuse if you like. I try to picture what I mean. And so to limit the work, I simply ask them, how many plates can you spin without breaking them? And everyone gets it, no matter
Mhm.
culture, right? And so when I need to explain them, you can be as expert as you can, but five, six plates are very difficult, right? And even just one, maybe it's not enough. So come up with your own example that fit the culture of your organization. But I agree with you, Jose. Sometimes words and mantras are limits, right? So we need to break these chains. Thanks.
And I love the thinking through what the mantras and the words actually mean. I love the whole thing about double loop learning. So not just use it, but actually question and think about what it means and how it resonates, how people listen to it, and then observe the behaviors. Because I mean, for me with whip limits, I spent years seeing people resisting it, and the whole community moans that everybody is always resisting. And then it's like, okay, but why are we resisting it? And let's do something about it. And for me, part of the answer is changing the language. It's not culturally resonant. So thank you, Johnny.
Hi, Jose. I just wanted to ask, do you think that having width limit across a board rather than per column is bad practice? Because I have a very small team of about 3 people.
Yeah.
We used to have about a width limit of 6 per column, and that's where the problem started because people kept starting work and not finishing it. So what do you think about, in terms of a small team, having a board width limit as opposed to a column width limit?
I don't use. Sorry, what's the question? Sorry, can you ask me a question again? Because I think I misheard something.
Yeah,
The last,
is using width limit across a board, an entire board, rather than per column? Do you
I,
consider that bad
for
practice?
yeah, for me, it works better because in some ways, I mean, it has. I could go much deeper into this. But success as a team, as a system, as a team, is delivering the work. Yeah. So if we deliver the work, then we measure the throughput, tells us what is our capacity, can give us a hint about what is the capacity to deliver work. System WIP, that is sort of like aligned to that WIP, that throughput, is bringing that balance between, okay, well, as a team, as a system, we seem to be able to deliver this amount of work. And you're going to use forecasting techniques, I hope, for this. So probably we need to put a WIP which is congruent with that that rate of delivery. So you put the WIP at the system, because value is delivered at the system end when the work exits the system from that system's perspective. So the WIP at the column, in some ways, it doesn't make sense. It would make sense if we were in a very stable, in a much more stable environment, kind of like manufacturing, things like that. But if you think a team the team is supposed to, I'm going to say, float around columns, move around, the team will move around to do whatever is more meaningful and impactful today. Yeah. So you put a WIP of 6 in one of the columns, but the whole team might be somewhere else. What does that 6 now suddenly represent? It's no capacity because the team is moving around. So if the team has to move around, to coalesce around the needs of the work, then the column whips start losing all meaning. And it's the system capacity what matters, the system workload what matters most. Yeah, that's how I see it. Yeah, usually we have too much variability and complexity. People move around, so you start the system whip makes more sense. There are caveats, but and probably there are exceptions. But typically, I haven't seen a good use of whip limits in my entire career.
You've never worked with me, Jose.
Hey, yeah, I just want to say in my entire career. So yeah, not saying that they are not, but I haven't seen them. Yeah, cool.
Helen.
Johnny, did I answer? Was it Johnny? Did I answer your question?
Yeah, I think so.
This is the other thing. Sorry, go on.
I was just going to say, from what I understand, that having whip limits at a board level is perfectly acceptable.
The other thing that I see many times is that if whip really is associated with, like, the ideal whip is balancing our capacity and our workload. If that's true, and I'm saying if that was true in your context, what many times we do when we start putting whip is that the whip tends to be too high. And then is what I see many times in organizations, that organizations say, hey, we need to collaborate. Yeah. But then we allow the system to have enough work in the system where collaboration is impossible because everybody's busy doing their own thing. So even sometimes it's even intentional that we try to bring the whip a little bit too low so that collaboration has to happen. Otherwise, people will be idle.
That's kind of what I was doing. So we had high width across all the columns, and I'm now looking at just a board width, which is only 5 across the entire board. But the problem is that if I segregate that 5 width between the columns, you're going to have one piece of work in planning and maybe 2 in development and 1 in testing, which is very limiting.
Yeah. But if you think that 5 is the right level of width for that group of 3 people, which without knowing more could be all right, five pieces of work for 3 people. I mean, that implies already that they cannot be working on everything at the same time. Yeah. But if you think that, then having column whips might not be necessary, might not give you any advantage in managing the workflow, the flow of work.
Yeah.
So it might be an experiment to say, like, let's run for a little while with just system whip and see what happens.
Oh.
Helen?
Jose, thank you very much. I too have also experienced the sort of the resistance, the people resistance through attempting to teach people about the benefits of using whip limits, and they took it very personally and thought it was a reflection on their productivity.
Yeah.
So I've thought, right, well, I'll park that for now and I'll come back to that one later.
Yes.
What I'm doing with this team is it's a non-engineering team. They're service driven, and they do a lot of governance process that they are accountable for a big program of work. What I'm interested to get your advice on is I'm currently value stream mapping these processes with these key experts, and then what I'm doing is asking them what is their existing process today. But what I'm interested to just clarify, because I've got very low flow efficiency with that team, because stuff just stagnates. And then on the last day of the sprint, suddenly things moving are done. So the burn down charts always look like I'm never really making much effectiveness in the team as a scrum master. And it's just because of the system or the ecosystem that I'm working within that has got the constraints, not necessarily at the team level. What I'm interested to know is how surfacing those delays and those wait times. Are you recommending that I have that conversation with the team to identify where the delays are that they see and have them in the workflow at the team level so that we can see them on the board as columns and that they're steps that they would go through.
I'm thinking, it kind of like what I'm hearing resonates with me. Take with a bit of salt because I haven't seen the system.
Yeah.
But sometimes it's quite useful to emerge those. What I said, that would be part of the weight flow. It's like, I often talk about when you have an active column. I don't know if I think I'm going to answer your question to some degree, but hopefully I don't go into a tangent. When we have many times active columns, and you look at the active column and you think about who's working on this column, and there is only 2 or 3 people working on it, but there is like 20 tickets. Most of those tickets are in an active column, but they are not active. They are orphaned tickets. So one thing that I've done especially when we used to have more physical boards, we used to how do you mark an item that is blocked? By convention, you start putting pink tickets, pink markers. Yeah, I used to use with teams recommending that they start work that was in an active column and was not worked on to put a green ticket, and the green tickets show sub-ticket that show that it was orphan to work, because again it was an illusion of progress, an illusion of activity. There are 15 tickets here. There is only 3 of us. We cannot possibly be working on 15. Is that multitasking fallacy? And if that's the case, that you start surfacing that orphan work, and it could be that it's like the work is finished, it's ready to move to another stage, but it's waiting for something. Visualize that. And in some environments, for example, like things like it might be that temporarily it's good to emerge that extra column to visualize what's happening. So then the team can actually reflect on it and measure that and have like, this is the impact, this is costing, 20% of your lead time, cycle time is in this column where nothing happens. What can we do about it? Yeah. Okay. So it might be very useful to visualize those things. Items that are orphaned in an active column, and items, especially age, will show you this, because the items become aging and aging and aging. It's like no one's working on it. Yeah. Or someone is stuck. And then those columns that are hidden, the waiting things that are hidden inside the active column. Yeah. Okay. When we do visual stream mapping, one of the things that I am careful about is that this is not a problem with visual stream mapping, but it can happen, is that visual stream mapping tries to identify all the different steps. Yeah. And it comes from the manufacturing world as a technique. Yeah. So I might be wrong, but this is how I say it. We become prescriptive and we become quite detailed about the process, and then we start visualizing that. But that process, that kind of visualization, we can over design the workflow in a very linear, strict way, and that may make sense if you were in an ordered, predictable, stable, semi-predictable, stable, complicated environment. When you take it to the VUCA world, then, if you put all this, if you over-design all these columns, what you have to expect is that it's going to go back and forth. Because you can design the columns, and then it starts like, okay, well, I mean, this happens especially when you're doing things like discovery, work and stuff like that. When people are, I don't know, discovery, design, UX. It's like, oh no, these are meant to be looping with each other a little bit. So put a single column. And if you want to visualize that subcategory, make it maybe vertical in the column, so it doesn't have to move back and forth. It's in this kind of like research piece or discovery piece, but then you can do visual techniques to say, okay, in which one of these subcategories it is. Yeah. Okay. I don't know if I'm explaining myself. I can see it. I'm doing things with my hands, but that's never good. Yeah, but sometimes with VSM, what I see is that I will always remember I think it was Lean Kanban UK. Sadly, it was the same conference that we just found out today that Steve Van Gay died. He did an amazing keynote in that year. In the same conference, there was a talk by Department of Work and Pensions, I think it was one of the government departments, and they were talking about they did all this flow mapping, all this BSM and things like that, and they ended up with a 40-column board with something like 10 or 14 swim lanes. And then they were wondering why nothing could flow well. And of course, with limits in every column. And it's like, you just over-designed your flow. Yeah.
I think the thing that I'd say here, though, is like the thing that the objection in my mind is value stream mapping is not about taking that and building a board from it. Value stream
Yes.
mapping is about understanding the process, the things that add value, the things that don't add value. And the way that Helen is applying it, it's useful to understand the process and where optimizations can be made. It's wrong to take that and then to build your board from it. And remember, Kanban talks about dominant workflow activities, so you should be building them around the dominant things that you do. And I like the bit that you said earlier on about not having them as roles. But I didn't want there to be any confusion that you do value stream mapping and then you build a board based upon that. That's really not what it's about.
Okay.
I've seen value stream mapping used that way, and that's not great. That's not
Yeah.
ideal. And I was just remembering again that Department of Work or Justice, whatever it was, that they had like 40 columns, 14 swim lanes, and it was like, it's just insane. But yeah, it's a great point, Helen. Yes, I agree with you.